Hey, welcome to the Road and Morale podcast. So do you ever feel like screaming out in the office, on Zoom or outside the school gates? For the love of God, come on, really? And if this is you and you're looking for an honest, fun and frank podcast on life and business, then sit back and listen to me, Rona Morale. I'll be bringing great people on the show to talk, share and debate their life experiences and business challenges, keeping the show unpolished, but in a fun and unique British style, with sarcasm, tenacity, or maybe a few swear words or tears. This podcast keeps it real, honest, raw, and removes the bullshit in the only way I know how, through authenticity and getting shit done. Think of it less like the Housewives of New York or Towie with the lipo and drama, and more like the house lives of the real world. I hope you'll take something away to be better informed, laugh, smile, or maybe even finally getting the confidence to shout, come on really. So enjoy. Hey Debbie, welcome to the Road and Morale podcast. How are you?
I'm fine, Rona. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm really looking forward to this session. So for the listeners out there, I'm delighted to have Debby Lee on my podcast, and we were just discussing how long it had been, and we think it's been about 20 years.
Around 20 years.
Exactly.
Probably on a beach in Ibiza.
Ibiza, Marbella, Morocco. I think there was a few to name, but those secrets will remain
Yes.
secret.
Yeah.
But listen, I'm for the listeners, I'm delighted to introduce Debby Lee. And when we first met through the arts and entertainment and the music industry in London, so Debby is or has over 30 years in the music and arts industry, starting with superclub brands such as London Astoria, GAY, Bagley's Warehouse, and Pacha, to name a few. And way back in my day, I was looking after Ministry of Sound, Fabric, etc. So this is where our paths first crossed. But since then, Debby has transitioned from that into sort of content creative and working with brands, for some big name brands as well, with some successful activations across the board. And it was only natural in a way that you kind of progressed then into film writing and kind of editing series, and you have your own business, which is a boutique documentary production company business called Debonair. Love the name, by the way. But I know that you have also worked and been celebrated as an executive producer as well, writing documentaries, feature series, and I'm sure we'll touch on some of those for those stories that you can and are able to share. And most importantly as well, Debby also works championing diversity with Kenya King, who's a CBE, to make sure that the inclusion across the industry, across music and arts, is included. And we'll also touch on this a little bit later, but through the work that Debby does with some of her programs with Netflix, etc., we are working with the Albert Sustainability Production Certificate, which is something I want to touch on later, because as you know, all things sustainable is kind of my bag. So welcome again, Debby.
Rona.
I have not done you any justice at all in terms of that introduction, but let's go back a few years. Just take me through a little bit how your career has gone from, the nightclubs, music, into film and production, and why it's happened.
Well, nothing was planned. It was all a happy accident, really. A very happy accident. When I left school, I left school. I was a terrible student. I mean, I'm going to say I was clever, but I wasn't interested in education. And I think it has to even go back beyond that, because I grew up in Essex, and around the time of jazz, funk, soul, and the whole of that era, and Essex in particular, was like brilliant for clubbing. And I got into the music probably through friends of mine's older sisters or brothers, and and the whole, and I was very lucky because I went to a little Jewish youth club,
Right.
one of the guys there's parents owned a big nightclub in Ilford, and so he used to get all of the DJs from this club to come and play at a little youth club DJ discos. And when you now, they're legendary. That if you're into jazz songs, so like Robbie Vincent, Froggy, Chris Hill, these are people that were like absolutely, the top of they were the superstar DJs of that era for that sort of sound. And so I had this love affair with music, and that was it. And from the age of 13, I was like out clubbing, really. Very innocent. I wasn't a wild child. I just was genuinely into the music. And I think, there wasn't a thing as ID back in those days. And so, and from there, that was my education gone. But it was my education life. So it was all a bit of a happy accident. And I wanted to get into the creative industries, and I didn't really know how to break in. And somehow I thought about fashion. And my mum said, I don't know what I can say and what I can't say about organisations. I have a lot of respect for them. But my mum said, if you want to work in fashion, go and work for Marks and Spencer's. I thought, that was a bit that was a bit of an oxymoron, really, because I probably would have done very well with Topshop or a brand like that. But, it was just the wrong fit. And but I got really, actually, I have to say, you'd never get these jobs now. It was like, graduate, you would have to be in a graduate training course now. It would have been a graduate training program now, but they did take you at 16 to do training, like sort of business management. And it was like almost doing like a business degree, really. And it was quite a tough gig to get into, but I managed to get my way in. And it was brilliant I think whatever I learned there in that year and a half I was there has sustained me to sustainability in a different way. But I mean, it really has, because it was brilliant training, but it was the wrong culture for me. And I managed to, because I was still clubbing, and at the time I was working Marks Spencer's, and you had to work through every area of the business. So I was actually working for a short time on the shop floor. Nothing wrong with that. But I was very good friends with Boy George, who was just becoming famous. So he would come in and visit me. It was like, oh my God, like, who are these wild people coming?
I was going to say, I can't imagine Boy George shopping in M&S.
No, but he did. And with his friend Philip Salon, who was really famous for like being a Blitz kid and the Mud Club. And these are all the sort of places I was going. And so, from that, I just had a lot of a network, and I didn't realise what a network meant. What does network mean? But I did. And I sort of had a lot of chutzpah, and I sought myself into working for this tiny little independent record label that was doing British dance music, which was unheard of, because British dance music, you just couldn't get away. There wasn't even a platform for it. There were two, I think, Greg Edwards on Capital Radio and Tony Blackburn and maybe Robbie Vincent on Radio London would, mostly play American music, but you could sometimes get something played. So it's astonishing to think about that journey. So, and that was it. And I was in the club industry without knowing. And then I used to take my records around to DJs, and there was one DJ that ran a night at the Astoria, which was a polysexual gay night. And he liked me, and he was like, you should come I was 17. He said, come and work for me, help me with my PR for my nights. And that was it. So it was all a happy accident, really. And from there, I was running, this was like mid-80s, and it wasn't, it was quite exciting to be running a gay club, because that was where the most interesting things were happening, because it was at the time where disco had died. Clubbing hadn't quite found itself yet. I mean, I have a lot of respect for them, but Stock Aitken and Waterman were dominating the charts. It was very like, Thatcher's Britain. It was all very safe. There was no rebellion. There was no, and then there was a profound moment when I was walking down Old Compton Street and saw this gay guy I knew, and he'd come for, and he was like of the time, the Levi 501s, the leather cap, the vest top, and there's this guy transformed. I think it was about 87. It was about 1987, maybe early 88, in a caftan, and I thought, with flowers in his hair. I thought, what's happened to him? I thought he'd been sectioned or something, And I thought, what's going on? He goes, you've got to come to this club, blah, blah, blah. And it was literally, it was heaven, Soundshaft. It was called...
I had some amazing nights there.
Control, and it was like, and I walked in and thought, what is this? And it was like landing on another planet, because no one explained it. Nobody knew what it was. Obviously, everybody, can I say this, Rona? Everyone was obviously on happy pills, and,
you can say that.
In ecstatic time, and nobody knew what that was. And of course, the gay scene was really always early, early adopters. So, and the
Yeah.
music was so brilliant because a lot of it was coming over from Paradise Garage, from Larry Laverne, from all these amazing America. They were playing the best house music, and it hadn't really quite broken through to the mainstream, but the music was incredible. Everyone was like loving each other, and it was quite extraordinary. And I would say within a matter of 3 to 4 months, something happened culturally. It was almost like a perfect storm.
Yeah.
And where, and I was terribly excited about it because of the music, but I was also excited that it felt rebellious again. And it was, it felt underground, and it felt, and I was there right at the beginning, and I thought, oh, and I went on to, so, I was working with a lot of those guys that came out of that scene there. I was introduced through Heaven nightclub, big gay
Yeah.
club, to some young boys that were starting nights like Paul Oakenfold, and actually called, they said, you must meet these boys, Danny Rampling, Shum, and it was like, you must meet these boys and you must meet this girl. And we started working a bit together. And, I remember a guy called Nicky Holloway did something called Trip at the Astoria, and I was running a night at Busby's, which was the LA2 downstairs.
Right.
And the police turning up innocently, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, which we used to shut clubs at 3 in the morning, remember, no 24-hour licenses.
No.
3 was late because the West End had an extra hour for the rest of the country. And they all, I think about 1,500 kids, in an ecstatic mood, shall we say, came out. And they were all, my dog's going to, but I hope this can be edited. Sorry, Buddy.
Oh, Buddy, welcome to the podcast.
My daughter's welcome to the podcast. My daughter's just walked in. Not a great time.
That's okay.
Sorry, bud. Sorry. Anyway, so and I remember they were all dancing the fountains in Centre Point, and they all were like, having the best time ever, singing Promised Land, Joe Smooth, brothers, sisters.
Wow, yay.
Everyone was, and the police coming on, they were laughing. They were like, who are these people? What are they doing? And and that was that. And then I went, I was doing nights, and then I met somebody completely fortuitously, a film editor, which is ironic. And he said, oh, you should come down and see this place I'm working from. It's this warehouse in King's Cross. And I was like, okay. And I went in, there was these production offices, and the owner came along, and he said, oh, well, you know about clubs. He says, people want to do a rave. What's a rave? Like, this was like about 1989. And I said, well, where? And he took me upstairs, and it was like, oh my God, this disused film studio in a warehouse in King's Cross. And it was Bagley's. So, and that was that next chapter. So that's really how it all started. So a real happy accident. Nothing planned. I don't think anyone did have a strategy for it,
I think sometimes you can't. There are those moments where the stars align, and like you say, we didn't necessarily look at it as a network, but it was just right place, right time, right person, right character, and it all just slips into place.
I mean, in relation to what you do, I think if we could go back in time, I think you would be very upset about the waste of bottles and plastic bottles and the Evian bottles that we went through. It wasn't the most sustainable. There wasn't anything about the environment going around then. I just think about the amount of plastic Evian bottles we went through those days.
I remember that. I just remember coming out of clubs, Light Fabric and places like that, where you would just see bottle bin after bottle bin. And 20 years ago, there was the science behind sustainability and all of that, but it wasn't something that was active in what on anyone's agenda. I didn't walk into a club and kind of go, right, so these are the products, this is what we're going to do, here's the pricing, here's the P&L. Oh, and what you're doing about sustainability. It was never, ever on the cards.
No, I mean, we must have had 2,000 to 3,000 people when the cross as well, probably about 4,000 people. And I would have said each one of them went through, 3 or 4 bottles of water at least a night.
Yeah.
We've probably destroyed an ocean somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. And the scary thing is, whilst I guess we're kind of far better educated and more active in this space now, unfortunately, those plastic bottles are still somewhere. And that's all burnt, and that's
the irony is that the kids on the scene, they would have probably been early adopters of the idea of recycling, because there was a connection of love and the planet and things like that, without being too hippie about it. But we've learned now. I
hope so, and I think that next generation has always had that freedom to learn and be open, and I'm hoping maybe COVID may have just injected that love and peace back into people. But so
we really certainly hope so. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
And I think, well, that's another topic. We'll come on to that in a bit. So going through those years of kind of music and clubs, and at what point did you kind of then move into sort of the kind of creative experiential content?
Do you know what? Again, another happy accident. I realised we were selling a lot of volume of booze, and I think I met you at that time in your former career for a big brand, and non-alcoholic brand, I should say. And we, you know, and I just realised that there were marketing budgets that were being flown around or being, and I, you know, realised that, you know, and you know, you'd get money for listing, you know, like if you sold our brand, we would give you X amount of money, and that would just go directly into the club owner's pocket, or in stock, and there was no real benefit to us. And I thought, well, if I can get in around that, if I can navigate around that and get in there first and come up with a creative idea that we get them to write a check. Yes, they're still going to do their stock deals, but there's a marketing budget which a club owner or a club operator wouldn't necessarily even engage with to go for that part. So and I, you know, so rather than put a banner up or a you know, sort of a logo on a flyer, which a lot of people did, I thought about doing something. And I remember the first thing, you know, I did that I can really remember that was quite interesting was Levi's, you know, were huge at the time, and they were doing something with Massive Attack. They were like like a brand ambassador. So I booked Massive Attack, and I said we were going to do like, you know, just make the whole club denim that night, you know, through projection, through cushions, through sofas, and they just loved it. And I said, why don't we do 2 nights? One night is a corporate event for you, B2B customers or competition winners, whatever, but then we use the whole set for a Saturday night, but you pay for Massive Attack. And so, you know, so I got the whole club decorated, and we had Massive Attack headline, and you know, and I just thought, well, this is good. And then it went from there, and then, like, you know, Bagley almost became like you know, like an experiential space. And I was, you know, I remember my favorite one was German Salon Selectives. There was and they had pink, it was all pink. So I, you know, so I had a lot of drag queens going up and down the queue going, hair emergency, and we'd take them into these pink salons and do girls' hair, like fantastic, and boys' hair, because remember the boys all had ponytails. Amazing staff. And so it was like, and then they would get samples when they left. So it was like, and actually I really enjoyed it. I love coming up with these ideas.
Well, it's adding value to not just the brand, but the club, but more importantly, the end user, the person in the venue.
And then one of the things was like, whenever there was like a World Cup or you know, it would always, people would go to the pub in the afternoon, depending on where the game was, and normally get really drunk. And so they'd either turn up at a club, and you did realize people turn up super drunk on the way in. On the way out, it's another question. And so it would actually be really bad for business for those 2 to 3 weeks of any sort of big tournament. So we so I remember going to Budweiser, who were doing a lot with, I think they were they
do a lot,
sponsors of this particular. And I said, why don't we do something called the Lion Lounge? We'll put big screens in, let our regulars by invite only, so it wasn't just like, you know, any randoms turning up. So we had about 15 to 20,000 people on our mailing, and we'd actually physically post out. That's not good for sustainability either. We'd print a flyer and post it, you know.
My God, posting something with a stamp on. Wow.
And then that was a lot of our marketing budget, all the posters and everything, which nobody does any of that anymore. So and we said, well, why don't we get people in early, so the game's on 8, and we won't get them very drunk, and we just do a whole thing called the Lion Lounge, and the whole night will be, you know, and it sounds a little bit cheesy now, and you probably wouldn't get away with that at Fabric or, you know, a credible music venue, but at the time the rave scene was not just, the music was great, but it was about the experience as well.
But I think it's about controlling the vibe as well, because actually if you have a win in our favor, then you have a great crowd. If you have a bunch of angry, annoyed, very drunk people, that's not what you want to open the door to.
I don't think England had a culture winning then, so it didn't really matter. I don't think anyone really expected anything to happen. You know, we're here, we might as well have a Saturday night out, you know, there's no real emotion around it. And then we and then you know, and then from that I obviously got to know a lot of the brand directors. you know, and I was quite a wily thing, and I thought this can't last forever, you know. Maybe I can carve a bit of you know, sort of a business out myself. And then I ended up doing, you know, they brought me in as consultant to do quite a lot of experiential marketing.
Yeah.
And then of course the world of content was like expanding and they wanted it filmed. So they would bring in their own film crews and everything. And I would see these huge budgets and thinking I was earning that and the productions were earning that, going to
Yeah.
ad agencies, you know, and I thought, I can do that. I know
I can
direct.
create just as great content with less.
I mean, you
Yeah.
know, I can get the camera crew, I can get the kit. It's not, you know, if when you're producing an event, you can produce a TV show, you know. I mean, the creativity behind it and the, you know, the story that you have to, you know, sell
Yeah.
it around is hard. But once you've done that, going into production, I'm not going to undermine that it's easy, but it's like running an event. You know, you're a producer, so
Yeah.
and that so I started expanding into that, and then I got the chance to do, you know, I thought about the 30th anniversary of rave music coming up from the 1987,
Yeah.
and I you know, and I sort of went to the BBC and said, do you want to do this? And again, it was a bit of hoots because I didn't have really you know, a background in that. And then yeah, and then we got, you know, sort of Sky Arts, God bless them, who are fantastic, who I have to
Yeah.
say. They're an amazing channel. And they, you know, oh, Rona, have you?
Yeah.
I've just heard a leak somewhere. Do you mind if I don't know, I can hear water.
Okay, so we're back.
We're
I'm
back.
pleased to announce that there is no major flood in Debbie's house, but her daughter may be in trouble.
Yeah.
No, so please carry on.
Yeah, so yes, so I went to Sky Arts and I said, look, I've got all of this content. I can make content, and I sort of was canny enough to sort of you know, collaborate with the production company, so they knew that I could deliver the
Mm,
basics. And we made something called the Agony and Ecstasy, which was a three-parter, well, four-parter on the history of British rave music, and it was wonderful. And I just thought, this is great, you know. And from there, it's gone on from there, really.
yeah.
That
So
must about what was that? It was 2017. So in 4 years, my sort of little boutique company's taken off. You know,
I love the name as well because it's so obvious and yet so,
yeah,
yeah, debonair. It's Deb on air. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And so in terms of some of the filming that you now do and the productions, can you tell us a little bit about some of the exciting shows that you've done?
Yeah, I mean, I seem to have carved a niche out for, like, you know, retrospective and for anniversary. So, Quadrophenia, I absolutely love making because it was one of my favorite films of all time, and it's just, and albums, and it's really sustained. I mean, you can watch that film now and it still feels fresh and it's so
Yeah,
relatable. Still, teenage angst. Where am I going? Who am I? What am I going to do? You know, and it didn't. And you know, you could see a real, like, you know, between mods and actually ravers, it was a very, you know, there was a similar sort of like outlook to life. They wanted something different, they wanted something better. They you know, it was all about going out, it was all about great music, it was taking pills probably, you know, different type of, yeah.
yeah,
And there was this whole, you know, I watched it with fresh eyes, and I knew the 40th anniversary was coming up, so I know the Who's management quite well. So
yeah.
again, I went to them and said, what, they own the rights because it was Who Films, and they said, "Yep, see if you can." So God bless them again, Sky Arts. We made a fan, and they give us so much freedom, and it was, you know, we managed to get everybody: Sting, Ray
I
Winstone.
saw that. I mean, just incredible.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, it's the first time I think Sting's ever talked about my, not because he's not proud of it, but it just hasn't come into his, you know,
Yeah,
his arena for a reason to talk about Quadrophenia before. And then we decided that we were going to do a table read reunion, which I have to say was before Friends did it. I wouldn't say we did it first, but you know, I like to claim.
we got in there first before Friends.
Just getting that cast together around a table and reminiscing, and it was such an interesting project because Frank Rodham, who was the director, an amazing director, who was the brainchild and creator behind MasterChef, by the way, as well as Our Feeder's Own Pet and loads of other stuff. But he, you know, he really did something really interesting, and he got all these unknowns because Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey, the Who,
Yeah,
they're not precious. They're really actually, they're just into, if somebody can appreciate art and create an artistic project, they're not, you know, but they sort of realized that, you know, Tommy had been a whole different thing with Elton John, and you know,
yeah.
and this was quite different. and they wanted the name Quadrophenia above the door to be the star. There was talk that Johnny Rotten would do it and things like that, but they couldn't get it insured for him actually. So they decided to have a bunch of relatively unknowns. I think Phil Daniels had done a few things, Ray Wilson a few things, but nobody knew them really. And they got them together, and they probably wouldn't happen in a production today because of money. And he made them sort of hang out for a month together, live
Love
together,
that.
go clubbing, do things. So by the time he got on camera, they were friends. It's a bit like Love Island, like sort of,
Quadrophenia, Love Island. Let me go with that for a bit.
But in a week, they seem to be best friends on screen. But they've formed these relationships. So but the wonderful thing about doing the reunion is those relationships were still really, really solid. They were still everyone's best friends. They grew up together. They've followed each other's careers over years, and so it was like having a bunch of great friends come together to tell, and they were all very generous. There were no egos. I mean, some of them have done better than others, in terms of, profile acting, but it was just wonderful. So that was probably, that's one of my favorites.
Well, that's going to have to go down in absolute history for you, because like you say, if the paychecks had have been their value today, and actually when you look at those involved, you wouldn't think of putting them together.
No,
you absolutely wouldn't. And I think anything like that is always going to stand the test of time. So it must have been incredible to hear and see them engaging with each other and chatting about the last 40 years.
But it also makes you think about, coming onto the subject of diversity, real strong films made, with working class voices. And these kids come from Amershire. They came, they came from, not particularly, dynasty acting families. They weren't necessarily they hadn't gone to RADA. They hadn't, and I've got no problem with that,
No.
But I do think, again, other than a few, like, sort of Shane Meadows and people like that, they're really, that was the interesting thing, to look at those actors and think it's a shame now that, diversity also is about a class thing as well, as well as, everything else that has to be factored in seriously. And I think that's the, I left school at 16. I wouldn't say that I was underprivileged, but I wasn't privileged either. But there was no way that somebody like me could get into, into telly and film. No. Unless you're a graduate, unless you privileged, unless and I think, to be frank, the whole of the creative industries, other than the music industry, I'd maybe be music. I'm going to be controversial here. Music industry at exec level, at senior management level in the record companies, but music was always a great uniter, like sport. It was pretty colourblind, really. And if you're just there on your merit of talent, but the barrier to entry across all the creative industries, not just telly and film, I'd say agencies, publishers, the art, theatre, it's done quite a poor job, really. But now I think the pendulum swung, and that hopefully, I hope that finally that it will come back into something. But I think class has to be factored in as well,
Yeah, and I think that's interesting, because when you look at Quadrophenia, it's about the authenticity of the individuals, their stories, their journeys, and you can't, to a degree you can teach that, but you can't teach the rawness of it. You can't teach that nature nurture that they have absolutely had in their upbringing. So yes, when we talk about sustainability, everyone thinks about recycling and carbon emissions, but it's so much more than that. It is diversity, it is inclusion, it's about age, disability, class, gender, all of those things.
An investment in youth, Rona,
on every level is shocking.
And if you can invest in youth, that's going to sustain society on every level. So, the barrier to entry, I've got a friend who's just got a fantastic job, actually, working across all the London boroughs. And she said she'll work in boroughs where, like, Tower Hamlets or, Hackney, or, where Old Street is, and you've got these incredible tech companies and everything else. And she's saying, you're going, far and wide to recruit. What about school around the corner?
They're so tech savvy, they'll shock you.
Yeah. But like the grassroots level, giving and so hopefully more work's going to be done on that. And again, that sustains us, and I think it sustains us in much more, not just an economic way, but I think an important unifying cultural way. Because if you have division and you have divide and you have this people have to sit there and these people have to sit there, but through the medium of business, if
Mm.
you mix everyone up from different gender, from different backgrounds, different classes, different cultures, that's a way of unifying, understanding one another. And I think that is the sustainability of so important for our
Yeah.
culture.
And it's a bit like, how do we go back to 40 years and get a group of people to go and live with each other for a month from very diverse
Yeah.
backgrounds, so you can learn to empathize and understand. I mean, you've only got to look at COP26. I think
Yeah.
2 women, 3, I think, in totality,
Yeah.
let alone disabilities or kind of color, race. And it all goes back to what you say. It all goes back to this piece around education, and you always feel like, you probably see it with your daughter, our children tend to follow in our footsteps to some degree. They are influenced by what
Yeah.
we do.
Yeah.
So if you have a constant stream of money and wealth and privilege,
Yeah.
naturally it filters, and I don't blame anyone for giving their child the best start.
Do I?
But what I do see in young people, and it's part and parcel why I'm a trustee on Education Africa, is that there is some amazing talent that we fail to see,
Yeah.
and we focus so much on the maths, the science, the English. The
Yes.
creative world
Yeah.
has led some of our biggest billionaires, biggest innovators the
Yeah.
world has ever seen, and these children have got that at their heart.
And it's interesting because I didn't make this show, but I was involved with a production company that did, and it was like a junior apprentice. And most of the kids that had that entrepreneurial ideal and like really wanted to like have it better, work for it, were kids from working class backgrounds or from immigrant backgrounds.
Yeah.
They had it in them. They had the entrepreneurial drive. We can, they had an incentive, and if we can hone into that. But I think it's, as I said, I think it's deeper than that. I think it's people being less in bubbles. I think,
Mm.
and through the workplace is a great opportunity to bring different people together. But there, as I said, I keep on saying about the barrier to entry. There has been a barrier to entry, and it's understanding. You said it's not necessarily. I mean, yeah, it's hard. Recruitment's hard because if somebody comes in and they've got a first in English, they're probably going to be a great researcher or a great writer,
Yeah.
and so do you put your investment into them or do you put your investment to someone? But I think with social media, the good stuff about social media, with YouTube, with if kids are genuinely interested in the art form that I'm involved in, which is content, if they can do it on their phone,
Yeah.
do it on your phone. You don't even have to get the numbers, but you can make a show reel to send to somebody. And I hope the consciousness is now looking outside of the box in terms of looking for these kids rather than just going down, and there's nothing wrong with going to film school. You need to go to film school, but or do you?
I was just about to say that.
Or do you?
Do
And
you?
no disrespect to the great film schools that are out there, but do you? Because if you can learn within the job, and that's something I'm excited about working with Kenya at Mobo, because
Yeah.
you know the idea is to she's got to pave the way, that's what they say. And if you can get people in on apprenticeships that learn on the ground, but then the whole thing has to be an investment basis. So in my business, if a TV channel says, right, we're going to commission this show, and I said, well, I want 10 people to come onto the show that have never worked, but showing a real passion for the medium,
Yeah.
then give us a bit more money just so we can slow down production to mentor them on the job. So rather than an editor under the cosh to get
Yeah.
3 of an edit in post production that costs a lot of money, or you've only got a cameraman for a day, and the last thing he needs is a kid saying, what's that, what does this do? Slow the production down,
Yeah.
have a cameraman for 3 days, give the editor 6 weeks, and let them sit with them.
Yeah.
Would be the dream, but it's the investment and commitment is really hard, and I think it's hard for the client as well as the supplier,
Yeah, because I guess, in summary to all of that, it's coming down to those time and money constraints.
Yeah.
And whatever you look at on the spectrum of, the sustainable development goals,
Yeah.
it always comes down to that. It's money and time and investors wanting a quick return. And so paying someone 3 days versus a day. And
Yes.
I think, but what's so frustrating, I think, is that we are, we're in 2021. We know all of this stuff. It's been going around for years. There's not anything that says it's not the right thing to do. And it's how do we, through your boutique production companies, through, Kenya and, how do we, because we can't rely on one person. It's got to be industry and sector driven. Tell me a little bit more, if you can, about the Albert Sustainable Production Certificate. And I know that's something that, because I'm really keen to explore how this is impacted on works that you do, say with your work with Netflix. They set a benchmark, don't they, that you need to follow certain protocols.
Yeah, I mean, all of the British broadcasters have been early adopters. I mean, Channel 4, BBC, Sky. Look, the environmental conversation's been going on, for many years. Greta, God bless her, and credit, really accelerated the debate. But it has been going on before that. And I think there was just like, look, I mean, it was a bit on trend as well, but that's a good thing. I don't want to say there wasn't any, substance behind policy, but it was pretty much that everyone started to understand how important it was some years ago. And I think hats off to a lot of the the actual suppliers that you had to have sign up to this Albert contract, which means that you try your best.
Right.
Now, getting a bit, I mean, I haven't seen it verbatim being that, and it will come, I'm sure, like, on a production only use electric vehicles, we didn't have that, but we do look at mileage, we do look at how we got people about, we do look at flights, and we do a carbon, carbon
footprint of the production.
So, I can't say that, we don't print a load of paper and call sheets and then they get put in the bin at the end of the day, or but we do try and have much more consciousness around it. And it's not because you have to, it's just, I think it's you're just a lot more considerate in terms of when you are planning. So I would sort of say to my team, don't bring bottles of water, get a water fountain for the day, and get everyone sort of a water cup to go around with. Try to buy, if we're going on location, I mean, we don't do the big shoots where you have caterers and stuff, but location, have sort of the biodegradable coffee disposable cups. So again, it's in our mind in the terms of also buying free trade products and things like that. So it's not it goes across the board. So
do you think it's becoming more part of the, instead of being a conscious thing, it's some of these things now are becoming an unconscious norm, where we're doing more than we think, but we know we've got to dial it up quickly?
Well, I do think it's unusual to see a water bottle on a set now.
Right.
Definitely. And I mean, Sky actually have got a huge, one of their massive corporate, what's the word?
Objectives.
Objectives is ocean, saving the ocean. So you can't go to Sky. They've got a huge campus down in sort of near Boston Manor, that side down Brentford, and you're not allowed to go in there with plastic. Everything has to be recyclable, or and I just think it just, I mean, they've adopted it. So I think, yes, I think people are conscious about paper wastage. I think as the younger teams are coming on, they're
holding you guys to account,
but they're more digital as well. They're by nature, they're more digital. They know about recycling. You wouldn't go somewhere without a recycling bin and not think about it. I think our generation are probably a bit naughtier. We try, but I mean, I think it just is a natural way. Why would you print off an Excel sheet when you can look at it on your phone? I like a bit of flair.
But there's something about that
being
able to hold it, write notes on it, edits and I know you can do all that on tech. I know you can,
yeah.
but you know, I'm still sort of in that camp. So it's like, right, how do I make sure that the paper's FSC? How do I make sure the paper's then recycled and it comes back as something else?
I mean, but I think this next generation, or like, you know, I would say 30 downwards, maybe 35 downwards, don't even think about printing things off. You know, everything is done on a laptop, everything is done on a phone. And I think it's just the old. So as we're retiring off and getting our gold watches, it might get a bit better.
There'll be no more piles of paper in my office anymore. It'll just be like tech. But then even that, you know, you look at it, you go, but then the power to charge the tech and the kind of server space, it's difficult. But I think it would be interesting. I think what's great is that companies like Debonair and the people that you're working with can kind of steal with glee what the likes of the BBC and you know, the Albert Sustainable Production Certificate are doing, so that we can go, right, okay, here's a benchmark. What can I and we do to follow that through?
Yeah, and you know what, you know, in a really, you know, cynical way, you know, which is not a bad thing, is, you know, we want to win commissions. So, you know, when there is a diamond diversity quota and there is an Albert, and you're forced as a supplier to like be part of that, you know, that process, you can do it. So, you know, some of us do it well, you know, go into it with all the right intentions, but it sort of keeps you on your toes in business a bit, you know, which is a bit shameful to say, but I think it does. So, you know, the end result is more diversity, you know, more, you know, and more sustainability, and, you know, being environmentally conscious. So that ain't bad, is it? You know, because you're being told it's not a case you've got to, you know, you have to, or, you know, or you should want to, but you have to. It does sort of take it into and it's nothing that's not manageable, you know.
And I think as well, whether you're forced into it, embarrassed into it, you lead with it. I think if everybody had that, you know, pill in this modern day, you know, injected into them, then hopefully we can get industries and kind of scale, because that's ultimately what we need.
And things, sorry to run a bit, things come to nature very quickly. So when this Albert, you know, the Albert contract was put into play, everyone was freaking out, and like, you know, every, like, you know, head of productions in an independent production company was running around, oh, you're doing this, are you doing that, and then suddenly it just becomes second nature. You do it. So, you know, I think it's been and it filters into your own life. You know, if you make sure you don't buy a bottle of water on a set, you're not going to buy one for the gym.
No, and I love it now, because occasionally I'll do something and the kids will be like, but Mom, you say this to us, and I'll be like, oh, shit, yeah. You know, it's that kind of reminder. And I am really, really hopeful for that kind of younger next generation, but equally it's not on their shoulders, it's not on their heads. We've got to sort the shit out now, really. But I think in the industry that you work in, it's great to hear that there's pressure from, be it voluntary, but at some point it will be made, you know, not legally binding, but it could be made compulsory. It's great to see that you're working with companies that have that at the heart, and then also around diversity, because like I say, the sustainable development goals are so much more than and I think that's where people get lost. I think consumers just see planting trees, carbon emissions, that's going to solve everything, and it's so much bigger than that. So it's fantastic to see you doing the work with diversity inclusion.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting about talent, I think. I think that's going to be, and private jets, and, you know, to take one person with their crew, or, you know, on a tour having 2 tour buses, because you've got the road crew and you've got the star talent. I think that's going to, you know, I'm not that part of the music industry or the film industry where I'm flying in Hollywood superstars, but it'll be just interesting to see how much, I mean, most of them drive Teslas, so I suppose that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just be interesting to see, because, you know, I've heard some great anecdotes. I mean,
come on, dish it.
Well, okay, if you're in a pub quiz, then you might guess who. But there was, you know, I think I told you the Davos.
Davos,
and there was a speaker there who's a very well-known, famous musician, very vocal about environment, and he'd left a particular green hat that he liked, a bowler hat in Dublin, and private jet to go and get it for him, take it to go to Davos. So and
I was gonna guess,
I may never work again if people
and
want.
I'm not actually gonna guess, because I'm just gonna leave that to the listeners. But I feel like I would get that right in a pub quiz. That is shocking.
Yeah. So, I mean, whether that's, sort of urban myth or not, I don't know. But I mean, I've heard it from good authority. So is that sort of, and, and I'm not going to pick that particular introvert, but there's a culture where, where I think, it's interesting how, and I'm not saying that I'm sure they're all, but I don't know. The answer is I don't know on that level, and that should be something. Maybe you should interview somebody who manages super pop stars or something. Or
you're the connected lady. If you can get me in touch with someone, I'm going to go grill them.
Is a great talent, to books a lot of big talent for shows, and she might be able to be a great person. On the rosters alone, it's worth having it.
And even at my time at the NEC group, seeing the concerts come in the stadiums and the backstage, when you see the amount of teams, and I've seen some artists who are just so humble and frugal, and they're just like, no, just me, Mike, I'll crack on, everything's fine. And again, you don't mention names, but the requirements of certain artists and their attitudes to what they want, demand, and need, is, I wish I'd have maybe had, well, I wouldn't have had a job, I guess, but I wish I'd have had more gumption to say, well, where you can stick that. But yeah, there's definitely a culture. I just hope more and more.
And I'd be interested to watch your podcast on how that is changing. Because as I said, we know. I mean, it's well documented. Sort of Meghan and Harry getting the private jet to Ibiza. So it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting.
But even that, I've got a good friend who's good friends with Harry and Meghan, and they did an incredible fundraising event, and they raised over £100,000 for the mental wellness charity. And that was a classic example of, not only were Meghan and Harry slated for something they'd done via travel, but the couple that had done all the money and raised the funds were also annihilated in the media through absolutely nothing. They'd done an incredible thing, raised all this money, and through misinformation. So I'm so dubious about what I hear and see in the media as well. And there are always 15 sides to a story, that when you've been privy to both sides of the story or information that's not in the press, you just think how easy it is that people get judged.
Of course. And I mean, and that's the sad thing about society. I mean, look, nobody. I thought sorry, something happened just there.
That's all right.
And I think that's the sad thing about, we talk about sustainability, and we talk about mental health, and and when you're bombarded in Trip Fred with that as an example, negativity, judgment, vilifying people, being downright nasty and inaccurate, it's is that good for us? Does it make you feel good when you read it?
It's not, and I think even
area or yes, does that is that good for you?
No, it isn't. And I think actually what's, well, we won't solve this one, but I might pose it, I do know someone who owns a private jet company. The reality is we've got thousands of private jets and planes and big trucks and tour buses. So what we can't afford to do as a planet is just, create dead assets and just wipe them all out. We need to find ways innovatively to go, okay, how can we convert those vehicles into electric or biofuels, etc. So I think there's hope, but whilst there isn't,
I think things are starting to happen, Rona. Again, back to the music industry, I went to see this new place that's been built where the Astoria was, which, if you listeners, I'm not assuming everyone's from London and knows the West End London, but, it's at the real centre of London, centre point. There was, the Astoria was a very big, famous live rock venue, and it was famously opposite Denmark Street, which was like our Tin Pan Alley, and there was developers would come down and flatten it and what have you, and these developers come in and they've saved it. They've saved all the fascias, they've kept all the small businesses, they've kept Denmark Street, but they've built this incredible venue that wraps around it. I mean, you have to see it to believe it. It's quite extraordinary. If you go to Tottenham Court Road and you're walking down Charing Cross Road, it's just literally next centre point. It's a big
Can you actually get in there now? Because I know when I come out of Tottenham Court Road recently, it's kind of all covered. Can you actually access?
Well, you can walk past it, walk around it now. So if you start and you do the whole block going towards centre point and come back on Charing Cross Road, you'll see this incredible building.
Right.
But what they've done is they've created this plug-in venue. So literally the star can stay, the star talent can stay in the hotel that they've built on the other side of Denmark Street, and there's a tunnel under that takes them straight onto the stage.
Brilliant.
So you don't have to worry about cars, drivers, entourage, tour buses, they can arrive there. And it's all plug in. So the whole thing is like literally there's no backline, there's no, you haven't got a big, I mean, you do need to, obviously some people want to bring their own kit and what have you, but generally, if everything's digitalized,
you can literally plug in and play.
So talking about, rather than Edwin Shirley turning up with 30 trucks, you're talking about, a laptop,
And listen, before we wrap up, what's your views now on, especially in the industry that you're in, and the use of technology? And we briefly spoke earlier about the ability to create content on an iPhone. How do you see that do you see it as a risk or as a challenge, or something that you're embracing within production?
I think it's fantastic. I think, look, the capabilities of, what's going to happen the capabilities of what you can do now is beyond me, because I should be using a parchment and quill, quite frankly. But, I think it's fantastic. I mean, if a filmmaker can go out there on their iPhone or whatever, their Samsung or whatever, and make a film, and then edit it. I mean, my daughter, she's just done a project with some friends. She just left the Brit school, and they've just got their little mates that, for all purposes in our life, it would be friends from the playground, and they've made a TV series.
Love it.
Now, it's like they've filmed it, they've edited it, they've done the graphics, they've graded it. I mean, it's just like quite incredible. I mean,
do you feel the industry as a whole is receptive to it, or do you still think there's a bit of resistance because of the fear of?
Well, I'm not sure it's fear. I think it's more about, it's so much more than pointing and shooting, isn't it? It's it's you're dealing with talent. A director, I don't think, could ever be a robot, because you deal with human emotions, you're dealing with human beings, a vulnerable time when in acting or if I'm interviewing somebody or someone's playing a piece of, you've got to be the right sensitivity and the right atmosphere around that for them to put out their creative, pour out the. So, I think it's a bit of both, but, the truth is, who knows where it's going to go. I mean, one of the projects I'm working on at the moment, I'd be a little bit candid about what I say, but it's with Pete Townsend, again, another Who project. And, he predicted, he went to Ealing Art School, and he predicted he was very informed by his lecturer there at the time, a guy called Roy Ascott, who talked about the grid, which was a form of, the web as we know it, and this was in 1968. So we're talking about that journey and his excitement about technology and his love affair with technology, and there's a lot more layers to it actually, and it's a bit of a love story and everything, but it's what we're working on at the moment and we're in production with. And I just think, when you look back and think about those early days of the web, before there was any platforms like sharing platforms and streaming platforms, it was like, where's it? It's come along so quickly.
Yeah, scary actually.
I don't remember when I started getting Netflix. What was that? 3-4 years ago? When did Netflix do something? And now it's just become part of our, cultures. And like now we all want to stream. Our culture change. So the capability behind the scenes of how you serve up that. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm really a fan of the algorithm, because I just would like to go searching myself. But, it is convenient, and they do know me. They know. Like, so they're going to say, so that, but I just think, can you imagine where the algorithm can go? And it is scary, but it's exciting as well. And it's like social media, isn't it? What an amazing revolution for us culturally,
Yeah.
to connect. I mean, but there's a downside to that too. If it's not controlled, it's not regulated, if it's, if it's the Wild West, and a lot of people getting hurt by it as
Yeah.
well.
No, absolutely.
And it's a new form of addiction. I'm sure there'll be a form of Alcoholics Anonymous for social media users at some point.
Yeah, I think I actually found out this the other day that there's a couple of regions across the country that the doctors are prescribing social care, and not social care as you and I know it, but in terms of going for walks and having Pilates and refraining from certain forms of tech to allow that mental stimulation, and depression, anxiety, things like that.
Yeah. Well, it was the off-grid thing, and I mean, I remember talking about Hollywood actors. Was this somebody I know was involved in this project in Newfoundland, and it's like this luxury hotel they brought in, like the designers who did Soho House, and it's a wonderful story. In fact, that's somebody you should also interview. Oh my God, yeah, I'm going to introduce you to Nina, because she designed a lot of the furniture for it. And
Awesome.
But they were charging like silly money to stay there, like ridiculous silly money. But the Hollywood set and the uber rich and the oligarchs would go there because it was off grid. And I thought, why can't you just turn off your phone?
But it's so true. I understand that they don't want to be stressed or around like Rona on a happy beach in Benidorm. Like, I get that.
Yeah.
But you can be off grid anywhere. Like, I've been off grid in the middle of Uganda. No one would have even known I was there had I have not been posting it on Facebook. So the world is big enough to go off grid.
Yeah, but we are hooked, aren't we? I mean, is it guilt about turning our phone off? Is it like, I mean, I do remember a time when we didn't have phones and you would go on holiday and queue up at a phone box with your coins and hopefully get through to your mum to say you're still alive,
Yeah, well, when you were after uni, it was a payphone.
And that, the luxury, and don't you think people were better at timekeeping as well? I mean, Zoom's actually made us quite good at timekeeping, I have to say. But, like if you said to somebody, I'm going to meet you at 8:30 outside the Astoria, you would be there at 8:30 outside the Astoria. Now it's like, oh, I just text, I'm on my way, It's
no, see, I'm still a stickler for time. And
I'm not great with time.
Well, you are on time today, so that's.
My friends say DM to Debbie meantime. I mean to be there on time.
Brilliant. Listen, honestly, I feel like there will be a second series of this where we all delve more into the interesting stories we've both experienced over the years. But listen, Debbie, thank you so much for your time. Your journey has been.
My shower. Sorry about that in the middle. I hope that can be edited out.
Oh, don't be daft. We leave all that sort of stuff in. I have kids coming in, dogs barking, all sorts. But no, thank you so much for your time, Debbie. And I look forward to seeing.
Catch up.
Oh, I can't believe it's been nearly 20 years. But I think good luck with Debonair. And I know for
Rona, you look exactly the same.
As do you. I've got a few more wrinkles and
a bit of Botox. I'm not sure if that's a green thing to do, but
Oh, brilliant. But listen, thank you so much. And we'll definitely keep in touch.
Keep in touch. Take care. Thank you.
So that's it. You've made it. The show's over. Thank you for being with us. I hope you've been able to take something away, maybe solve a problem, or just know you're not alone. Here's hoping it made you smile with a few laughs along the way. Please feel free to find me on all social media channels, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just search the Rona Morel Podcast. Have an awesome day and see you next time.